In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the rear brakes, pads, and rotors on this Toyota Corolla. Located right behind your rear wheels, let's get started. To safely perform this repair, we need a scan tool capable of retracting the electronic parking brake. Once we have our vehicle selected, each scan tool will look different. For us, we're going to go into the anti-lock brake / electronic parking brake. Often, you'll see something called hot functions or quick functions. That's where you'll want to go. I'll go into functional tests, special functions, EPB full release. There we go. You'll hear the brake calipers in the rear retract the pistons, and that's done. So we'll exit this. At this point, you can shut the ignition off, disconnect your scan tool. Of course, if you don't do that, the battery will drain. With the vehicle safely raised and supported, if your vehicle has hubcaps on the wheels, you'll want to remove them. If not, of course, skip this step. To remove them, simply grab on to one side and pull firmly. Now you can use a 21mm socket, remove all 5 lug nuts, and then pull the wheel off. Now with the wheel off from the backside, we can see our caliper assembly. First, I will take off the bleeder screw cap. Sometimes this is stuck on here, so you may need a little screwdriver to help you pry it off. Then you'll want a collection bucket underneath. In my case, I have a drain bottle with a hose that can attach to the bleeder screw. This will just minimize the mess, as our next step is actually to push back the caliper piston, letting the brake fluid out through the bleeder screw. Use an 8mm wrench and open the bleeder screw. And now you could use a flathead screwdriver or a small pry bar and just pry this piston in by prying on the caliper. There we go. This should go nice and smooth. If it does not go smoothly, that means either the piston is seized or the slider pins are seized, in which case these would require further attention. But typically this does the trick. Now if you used a collection bucket and not a hose attached here that is filled with fluid, just give it about 5 to 10 seconds so a steady trickle of fluid can come out without any air bubbles being stuck in here, at which point you can close the bleeder screw. Just snug it. It is very small. It's easy to strip off, so you don't want to do that, of course. Using a rag and some brake parts cleaner, clean off the area. And cap off the bleeder screw. Now we'll use a 14mm socket or wrench and remove the 2 bolts holding the caliper onto the bracket. Often what will happen with these is the entire slider pin will spin. Try this one before we move on. This one's doing the same thing. So in this case, if you have a thin 17mm wrench, you can use that. Or you could use some pliers and carefully hold on to this. Just make sure you don't pinch the boot. A regular sized wrench will not fit in here, which is why I said pliers is your next best option. There's one. With the second one removed, you can take the caliper off. And when you set it aside, make sure it doesn't hang on either the brake hose or the wire and the connector that go to the parking brake motor, so just flip it over. Now we can remove our brake pads. Just simply slide them out of the bracket. If they're a little bit stuck, you can use a pry bar or screwdriver to help you out. Now with a 17mm socket, let's remove the 2 bolts holding the caliper bracket onto the rear end. We'll leave that one in a couple threads while we remove the upper one. Finish removing this and pull the bracket aside. We'll get it ready for cleaning. To remove the rotor, typically it should slide right off. This one is stuck on there due to rust. So the first thing I will try is to hammer on the surface of the rotor from the backside to break it free. If that doesn't work, you can also try hammering in between the lug studs. Just be very careful not to hit them. That will damage them. There it is. There's quite a bit of cleaning to do on this hub to make sure that the new rotor not only sits nice and flat on here, otherwise you'll have braking issues, but also so that it doesn't corrode in the future and cause the same issue. So I'm using a sanding disc to clean all of this up, but you want to use one that isn't too abrasive. You don't want to remove the material, you just want to remove the rust. I will also be using a wire wheel on a drill to get in the tighter to reach areas as well as around the center of the hub. Once it's all cleaned up, rinse it down with brake parts cleaner and then apply a thin coat of anti-seize to prevent further corrosion from building up. Take the new rotor and install it. I like to put it on backwards so that I can clean this while the hub is holding it on for me. With a drain pan underneath, spray this with brake parts cleaner to get off any oils that are on the rotor. Once it dried up, take it and flip it around and install it the right way. At this point, just to hold it on, you can use a lug nut. Otherwise, it'll just keep falling off or moving around, which can make things a little more difficult. Now spray the outer braking surface of the rotor with brake parts cleaner as well. We'll let that dry and we'll move on to cleaning our caliper so we can install it. With our caliper bracket on my workbench, the first thing I want to do is remove the anti-rattle clips. You could do this with a small screwdriver, a little pry bar, whatever you have, or just pry them out, but a lot of times they are somewhat stuck on here. Now the corrosion on here isn't too bad, so I'm just going to take a wire brush and brush it off. But sometimes you may need something as a file to get this nice and clean. All you want to do is remove the corrosion and then we'll coat it so it doesn't corrode in the future. Once you're done, rinse it off with some brake parts cleaner. Once it's dried off, take a thin layer of silicone paste that is rated for brakes, or you could take some brake grease. But whatever you use, you want to make sure it resists high temperatures, and coat the area that you cleaned with a thin layer so it doesn't corrode in the future. If you put too much on here, it will squeeze out when you put the anti-rattle clips on and it'll get on your rotor and your pads, and that is not what you want. Now we'll take our new anti-rattle clips and you want to make sure that the part with the hook and the spring here faces away from the center and is on the back side or on the inside of the caliper. Make sure they're fully seated. If you have a hard time pressing these on all the way, that is likely because you didn't clean enough here and here and there is corrosion still built up there, not allowing these to seat all the way. This part is all set, so do the same to the other side. At this point, we'll start cleaning and lubricating our slider pins. Twist and pull, hold the boot. Remove these one at a time because one of them, this one in this case, has this bushing. The other one will not. It'll just be a solid pin. Take a rag and wipe off the old grease. Clean it and inspect it. If any of the rubber components like this or this are swollen, replace them. Also, you want to make sure you see no rust or corrosion up here. If that is the case, you can typically use a wire wheel on a drill or wire brush to get it off and get it nice and clean. If it is severely corroded and compromised, replace the pins. It is also a good idea to remove the boots by squeezing and pulling, inspecting them to make sure they're not torn or swollen. Put the rag or paper towel right through the boot. Pull it out the other side. This will allow you to clean the inside and make sure that there's no old grease stuck in there. In here, if you want it to clean, you would use a bore brush on a drill and spin it around in there with some brake parts cleaner. This isn't always necessary, as in this case there is minimal grease in there and it's still actually in good shape, so I'll skip that step. But if you had corrosion especially, you definitely want to clean in there. With that done, take the boot and apply a little bit of grease on the part that goes on the caliper bracket. This will of course not only help it slide on a lot better, but it will make it seal up a lot better so moisture can't make its way in. Press it in all the way, make sure it's fully seated. I like to take a little bit of that silicone paste, especially now that I cleaned out the inside of the boot, and apply it to the inside of the boot where it folds. This will act as a reserve of grease so that it can be well lubricated over time. I'm going to put a thin layer on the pin itself. You can't put too much on it because it'll just get wiped off when you insert it, so just a thin layer will do. Also make sure you get some grease or silicone paste right up here on that ridge where it seals up. Slide it in. Sometimes it helps to twist or turn. Press it in all the way. You'll notice that there's air trapped inside the boot. That's normal. I'll wipe off the excess grease. The way to get that air out is to push in on the slider pin and squeeze the boot. Make sure this slides smoothly back and forth. And that's good to go. Do the same to the other side. Reinstall the caliper bracket on the knuckle over the rotor. And start in the 2 caliper bracket bolts. With these started, let's bottom them out. And with them bottomed out, torque them to 79 foot-pounds. Before we install our brake pads, we have to put on the wear indicators that are provided with your brake pads. Now what you want to do is hook them onto one of these ends of the caliper, but you want to make sure it's the end that'll be on the bottom of the bracket, not on the top. And the way you hook this in is it kind of springs around it, clamps on. So this pad now has it here. You want to make sure that the hook part of it faces away so that the flat part faces the rotor. This will be the inboard pad because it has this on the bottom. On the other side, we'll match it up so that we put it also on the bottom. Each pad in the rear of this vehicle gets one of these wear indicators, which actually also acts as a spring to hold the pads tight up against the bracket. And with these on, you want to put the pad in at an angle, start it in to the bracket, and then push it all the way. There we go. We'll do the same to the outer pad. There we go. Make sure your pads slide around smoothly. Otherwise, that means there is still corrosion here, and the pads are actually getting crushed together. If they're not able to slide back and forth smoothly, the brakes will not operate properly. Take your brake caliper, carefully slide it over the pads, over the rotor, onto the bracket. Have your bolts ready to start on so you can secure the caliper to the slider pins and therefore the bracket. Get these bottomed out. If needed, hold the pin with some pliers. Just be very careful not to damage the boot. Torque these to 25 foot-pounds. If when you try to torque these, the pin is spinning, just hold it with the pliers. If you used a lug nut to hold the rotor, you can remove it at this point. Reinstall the wheel. We'll put on all 5 lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern to seat the wheel evenly, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 76 foot-pounds. "76 foot-pounds in a cross pattern, here we go. Double check them all. If your vehicle had hubcaps, go ahead and put them on. And if that's the case, make sure the cutout for the valve stem lines up or this won't go on all the way. Don't forget to pump up the brake pedal, top off the master cylinder. To exit the parking brake service mode, all you need to do is lift up on the parking brake switch to enable it. After you've pumped the brake pedal, you'll hear the caliper motors run. When they stop, that's activated and set. So at that point, you can just disengage it normally and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.